listening to Give God 90, where we're not afraid of the tough biblical questions, because we will dig through the language, the culture, and the history to find the truth revealed in the words of our Creator.
I wanna see the light.
Thank you for letting me be part of your day. My name is Jerry Mitchell, your host for Give God 90. And I said, letting me be part of your day. Myra is working, so she may or may not be listening. I'm not exactly sure at the moment, but we will find out maybe. And if she chimes in or not, we'll see. Before I get started into a whole lot today, let me remind you of one thing, and that is, if you hear some rumbling and some grumbling, they are still doing construction in our area. So I'm doing this live. I'm not cutting out any of that. I'm not doing any of the weird stuff there. It's just there's some construction going on. They're pouring some concrete and doing some other things. So it's there. If you hear it, I apologize for that. But hopefully it won't disturb you. The other thing I want to mention is make sure you go to givegod90.com and check us out there. There's a lot of good stuff going on. And don't forget, I know a lot of you still like to give some gifts coming up. We have books still available from Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever fine books are sold. And of course, those are Tradition to Truth, One Man's Search for Honest Answers, and God's Universe, God's Rules. And, they're out there. They're available. I encourage you to get a couple copies. Keep a copy for yourself and keep a copy to give away. Sometime after the first of the year, and I'm not sure when that's going to be yet, but sometime after the first of the year, there will be another one. And the working title of that is Inheriting Lies. So you may notice that as well. It may be coming out hopefully shortly after the first of the year. That's what we're shooting for. Something else I want to... Now, I have a lot of listeners around the world, and we appreciate each and every one of you. But a lot of you are very interested in the pro-life movements. A couple of websites you might want to check out, and that is preborn.org, just like it sounds, or jewishprolifefoundation.org. Either one of those should be a good place for you to look at and possibly maybe even help them out a little bit. The preborn.org is doing a really good promotion right now. They're making sure that women have access to seeing ultrasounds, making it very, very affordable for them to see their ultrasounds, so that because it's been a proven statistic in the last few years. If a woman who is pregnant and considering abortion actually gets to see her own ultrasound, not somebody else's, but her own, and they realize that this is a life growing inside of their body, they are less apt to choose abortion, and they are more apt to choose life. Whether that life leads to adoption or they raise it on their own with a little help from some other organizations, that's up to them. But, what we're here for is not... And let me repeat that. We are not here to murder babies. Okay? We are here to make sure that we do everything we can to encourage life and to support life and to really embrace life. And that's why we do what we do. And it's kind of odd that I would choose this next verse from 1 Chronicles to begin the show. But I have my reasons, as I usually do. I have my reasons. In 1 Chronicles chapter 20, In verse 1, it starts out, "In the spring, at that time when kings march out to war, Joab led his army and ravaged the land of the Ammonites. He came to Rabbah and besieged it, but David stayed in Jerusalem. And Joab attacked Rabbah and demolished it." Why is this important? We talk about pro-life, and I talk about kings marching off to war. Well, the big reason is we do march off to war every day. Each and every one of us. We're all called to our battle stations. Let me go back to 1 Chronicles for a second. Why does it say in the spring of time when kings march off to war? Well, there's a lot of reasons for that. Many years ago, war was not something you did in the winter. Wintertime was a time for recovery. It was a time for training. Actually, the literal translation of this is at the turn of the year when kings march off to war. And that, of course, at the time of David, prior to the Babylonian exile. Now, after the Babylonian exile, now we have what's called Rosh Hashanah in the fall of the year. This begins on the, and this is going to sound kind of odd, but the Jewish New Year, as it's known today, begins on the first day of the 7th Jewish month. Let me say that again for those of you who are keeping score. The Jewish New Year, known as Rosh Hashanah, begins on the first day of the 7th Jewish calendar month, Tishri. Now, there's a reason for that, because everybody knows that in the spring is when the year actually does begin anew. Actually, that's why it's called Aviv. When the barley is at a certain stage, and that's how we know when the year begins. That's when the spring feasts begin. Therefore, it is the beginning of the months for you, the beginning of the year for you, right? As it says in Exodus. So, this turning of the year prior to the Babylonian exile always refers to spring. Now, that might mess with some of the newer traditions of some people that I know who talk about David and the reason that Uriah didn't go out and stay in his house was because everybody else was supposed to be in Sukkah. They think about this being the turn of the year being in the fall, but that's not what was going on culturally at the time. So wintertime was a time for recovery. It was a time for training. They didn't fight for a lot of reasons. It was a rainy season. It was muddy. It bogged down armies. And, believe it or not, the short hours of daylight made it just miserable for people of war, for the warriors to maintain the emotional, on edge, ready to go, condition one, as they call it. And I don't want to get too technical with this, but when you have a warrior who is preparing for battle, they need to be emotionally ready as much as they need to be physically ready. Much harder to do back then, especially when they were fighting. Even World War II was dependent on some things, right? D-Day had to have the weather just right. They didn't fight in the rain. If it was going to be foggy all day, it probably would have gotten called off. Other things, it was just, everything had to be perfect for D-Day to work. And what we're seeing, what we look at this time of war, is that conditions had to be ready. So they went out in the spring. Now, I said the other night, and I've had some comments over some things that I said, and it's kind of interesting. Those of you who are let me say it this: those of you who are willing to let your voices be known, I appreciate it, because without that, I'm not sure what y'all are thinking out there. Okay, I don't know what's on everybody's mind. So feel free to either message us through the podcast message. I have several social media accounts. You can message me that way. It's up to you. Let me know what you're thinking. When we think about warriors and battle stations, and I'm going to ask you later where your battle station is. You may not recognize your battle station right now. Hopefully, before long you will. Hopefully, you are in training, because your training never ends, right? A warrior's training never ends. Did you realize that there are certain weather conditions today? Oh, Myra is listening. I better behave myself. There are certain weather conditions today that affect when battles take place. Nobody's going to jump out of an airplane in a hurricane, right, to go fight a battle. It's just not something that's going to be done. Now, it is possible, if you have some severe weather conditions, it is possible to use guided missile technology and that kind of thing. You can do that. But what we're looking at is today, believers must understand and realize you're fighting a much different type of war. You're no longer in what we could consider the Dark Ages, right? Where you had to wait for certain times of year. We're no longer looking at marching out and like they did in the Crusades, where they would basically say, convert or we'll kill you. We have something different now. And I really don't like the term spiritual warfare. That gives us the impression that we are in some way fighting an enemy that we can't see. Now, when Paul writes in Ephesians 6:12 that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against the principalities and powers, against the rulers of darkness in the world, against spiritual wickedness in high places, we get this feeling, or way too many of us actually get the feeling, that we should just be able to pray and God will somehow magically send his angels and it will be taken care of, right? But Paul writes, and I need you to hear this, when we wrestle. This battle isn't being taken, I should say it this way, this battle doesn't take place in some spiritual realm. This battle doesn't take place just because we might not understand it. We're not, battling with swords and knives and shields and arrows and slings, or we're not battling with infantry and cavalry and horses and tanks and whatever your weapon might be from whatever era you might romanticize about. But we battle every day. Paul uses this to introduce his famous armor of God, what most Christians recognize as the armor of God. So why would you need armor if the angels are fighting your battles for you? What does spiritual warfare look like? The first thing we need to realize is that war does not stay in the spiritual realm. It affects us in this physical world. If you don't believe that, just look around. If you don't think evil affects our spiritual world, if you don't think evil affects this spiritual world, go stand in front of an abortion clinic. If you don't think evil affects this spiritual world, go stand in front of any hospital or any doctor's office today. If you don't think evil affects this spirit, if you don't think evil affects our physical world, you just go read a newspaper today. Look at the news. Just look around just a little bit. Open your eyes and see what's out there. The people who accept the unholy spirits in their life and act according to those unholy spirits are always going to produce unholy fruit. To put that in a biblical way. For those who may not be as familiar with that, let me say that these people are always going to do things to show just exactly how much they hate, how miserable and how sorrowful they are, how much chaos is in their life, how short-tempered they are, how boisterous and arrogant and conceited they are. They lie about everything. They cannot show love. They might say they love, but they are far too selfish, too self-involved to love anyone other than themselves. These are the things that we have to realize we are fighting. This is the war. Where is your battle station? Now, I know that nobody wants to hear this, but you need to understand that one of the battlegrounds is inside your churches and inside your synagogues. Think about that. Nobody wants to hear that, but it's true. We see things like witchcraft. And it's easier to deal with that than it is to address something more subtle. The parents who get embarrassed because their daughter comes home pregnant and they force their teenage child to have an abortion. That's the kind of thing we need to stand up against. It's not an embarrassment, parents. People are going to do that. They've been doing it for 6,000 years. It's not going to stop until the Almighty puts an end to it. Let me ask, is murder more or less evil than witchcraft? Think about that. Are the people who accept the worship of other gods, whatever they might be, are they any different than the people in some denominations who are claiming that pedophilia is now a normal sexual outlet? There are abominations that our Creator has established as unacceptable. And some of these things are being condoned in the fellowship of believers. We cannot be of one accord, as the King James puts it. We can't all be on the same page. And even if we're on the same page, it's not good enough. We need to be in the same paragraph, on the same word, on the same letter, if we are to actually stand and fight against evil. If a musician, if a symphony plays and everybody's on the same page of music, but not everybody is on the same note, it's going to sound terrible. And I could make a joke here, unless you're a fan of jazz, right? But you know what I mean. You know what I'm getting at. You have to be together. And the only way to be together is to be following the sacred word of our Creator. You've got to understand that we're not the ones who establish what sin is. The Almighty is the one who established what sin is. And if you choose to accept anything that our Creator has already told us that He hates, this is going to sound harsh, but if you choose to accept anything that the Creator says He hates, you are not fit to live in the kingdom. It's that simple. You're promoting sin. You're not standing with the Creator, you're standing and working against Him. Now, I'm not talking about the doctrines that or the traditions that many of you might have in your denominations. I'm saying if you condone the things that the Almighty Creator has established as sin, that's what I'm talking about. If you accept those things, then you are a sinner as well. Now, you have to remember, if somebody doesn't claim to be a believer, these things don't apply to them, right? It's kind of like if here in the United States we have the Constitution, but our Constitution does not apply to somebody who may live in Australia or China, any other nation. It doesn't apply to them. The sacred word of God is His instructions to those who follow Him. If you choose to reject Him, you are not bound by those instructions. And that's something else that believers need to understand. If you reject the Creator, then you are not bound by His instructions. You will be held accountable to them later, but not by us, by Him Himself. We need to remember that as well. So if it's your doctrine, whatever your church says, if it conflicts with Scripture, you've already got a problem. But if you're holding somebody accountable for something that you believe that's not in the Bible, and the other person who proclaims to be a believer is living a biblical lifestyle just because it doesn't match yours, you're the one with the issue. Okay? I wasn't going to go here, but I'm going here. There's church pastors I know personally that I treat as unbelievers because they condone sin. They don't speak against it. They don't stand up against it. And I look at them and I just pray for them because they're out there, folks. They're out there. They may not realize what they're doing, but they're doing it. They are condoning the things that the Almighty has said is sin. There's people that I know, that I socialize with, that do not claim to be believers. In fact, some of them claim outright atheism. And that's okay. Am I influenced by their lifestyle? Of course. Everybody's influenced by everybody else's lifestyle. But what you do in that situation is you stay faithful. You trust your Almighty Creator, and you don't allow their unbelief to overwhelm you. Our example as believers should be enough to influence them. And it often is. Excuse me. I have people that used to work for me that were for other, they belong to other religions. We all have to live on the same planet. It doesn't matter if you are Christian, Jewish, or pagan. You're all in this planet together. You're all living on this planet together, right? Your example as a believer in the Creator of the universe should be strong enough to influence other people. When it is not, when you become influenced by other people, you need to check your trust in your faith. That's kind of hard, isn't it? That's kind of harsh. Sometimes you need to be harsh. Sometimes you need to tell somebody what you're doing is probably sin. You might not recognize it as that right away, but if you are doing something that your Creator says don't do, or you're not doing something your Creator says do, that's sin, because in Scripture, sin is defined as a transgression of the instructions. You're violating the instructions given to you by the Almighty Creator. 1 John 3:4, if you want to know where to find that. If we look back through Hebrew history, specifically Jewish history now. The Greek and Roman occupation of Israel caused the Pharisees to make a ruling that the Jews should not associate with the Gentiles. There was a reason for this. It was a bad reason, but there was a reason for this. They didn't want the Greek or the Roman or the other pagan influences to be more attractive than what God was. The problem is they made these rules so overpowering and overbearing that they were just hard to follow. And you can't live in a world surrounded by other people and try to isolate yourself. That's just not healthy. The Pharisees say, well, you shouldn't eat with them, you shouldn't deal with them, you shouldn't have any financial dealings. But you can't. They're all around you. Evil surrounds you today. Can you avoid some of it? Yes. Should you avoid as much of it as possible? Absolutely. That's why I like the concept of the parallel economy. It's not an underground submersive thing. You just simply support the people that believe the same way you do. Right? Those are the folks that you hire to do the jobs that you need done. Those are the people who own the markets where you shop. These are the people. You support them, and they will help support you in turn. That is how you avoid as much of it as possible. More on that in a second. You see, we need to take action. But the action that we take is in expressing ourselves in our faith without speaking directly to it quite often. Our example is so important to those who reject the Creator because they watch, and they see what happens to those who claim to be Christian but don't act Christian, and they point out the hypocrisy. They see Jews today in many different sects, and they think, for some strange reason, the world kind of lumps all the Jewish folks into one bunch of bananas, right? And everybody should look exactly the same and act exactly the same. Well, they're individuals. Do all individuals look and act the same? Thank goodness no. Aren't you glad y'all don't act like me? Aren't y'all glad you don't look like me? Glad this is radio. I look much better on the radio than I do on television. Just saying. The people who reject the Creator don't care if they hurt your feelings. There's a big reason for that. They care more if they hurt the feelings of someone from any other religion than whether it's Christian or Jewish. Because they don't want to acknowledge any type of feeling for the Creator of the universe. That's why. They have rejected the Almighty Creator to such an extent that they would rather make a Buddhist or a pedophile feel better about themselves than to acknowledge that a Christian or a Jewish believer has any form of feelings. When you go to your battle station, wherever it might be, these are the things you have to be aware of. And you are chosen for the battle that you're going to fight. You're trained for the battle that you're going to fight. And you know what? You are given the victory for the battles that you accept. As long as they are the ones that were chosen for you and not by you. A lot of people have asked, and I thought I explained this the other night, but I guess I didn't. How do you know? How do you know what battle you're supposed to fight? How do you know where you're supposed to go, what you're supposed to say? And what they're really asking, I think, is how do I test this like Gideon did? I'm not sure my faith is strong enough to throw a fleece out and do what Gideon did. Well, you might be surprised, because it's going to be different for every person. I've had the chance to do this kind of in a way. And here's something I did. There was something that I really wanted to do, but wasn't sure if it was the right move. And a few years ago, I had lunch with a friend. And I said, if I'm really supposed to go do what I think I'm supposed to go do, what I think you're leading me to, maybe here's a good test for this. Now, when we went out to lunch, we never had dessert. Okay, there was no sweets at the end. And I said, okay, here's the thing. If you really need me to go do what I think you're asking me to go do, when we go out to eat, he's going to order lunch, or he's going to order dessert. But more importantly, when he does, it's going to be something he doesn't like. And I knew there was one particular dessert he absolutely hated. Well, guess what? That gave me my 2 confirmations, right? One was doing something that we didn't do. The other was him eating something he didn't like. I had 2 confirmations in one meeting. Sounds simple, right? Sounds easy. Now, I know somebody who did kind of the same thing. They had a meeting with someone, and they said, okay, if now this is something they didn't want to do. They were being asked to go somewhere they didn't want to go. Okay, it's just going to put it out there. And they said, all right, in this meeting with this person, I know they never use a certain word. If they use that word more than once, I will accept that as confirmation. And guess what? It was done. I was told about, I didn't witness this, but I was told about somebody, they had something they were supposed to do, and they were dreading it. Quite honestly, they were dreading it. And they said, okay, here's what's going to happen. They knew that a friend of theirs was a confirmed devout atheist. And they prayed and they said, Father, if you convert my friend to be a believer, then I will know you are telling me to go do this. It's not something that is come up on me. It has to come from you, because I've known him all my life. I know how this person is. If you confirm that person as a believer, I will go. Not only was that next Sunday that person in church, but they made it a point to come and actually speak in the conversation where this person did not want to go. Now that's confirmation right there. And that's something that anybody can do, right? It's not difficult. It's not difficult. You don't have to set these things up to be, impossible. Although, let's face it, converting a lifelong atheist, that's a good way to go, right? So where's your battle station? Is your battle station somewhere, I don't know, uncomfortable for you? Is your battle station someplace you don't think you want to go? Is the message that you're supposed to deliver something you don't want to say? You know, your message might be as simple as offering a prayer in a public place. In the United States right now, we're having a really tough time. Now, some of you in other countries might not realize this. In the United States, we have the public school system, and the people who are locally supposed to be administrating the public school system are elected by the local people. And right now, some of these local school administrations are having an issue with the parents because the parents are getting involved and these school administrations don't like it. And they've actually had a letter sent to the U.S. Department of Justice, and the U.S. Attorney General got involved. So now the FBI is investigating, the Federal Bureau of Investigation is investigating some parents who speak out at these school board meetings. And typically, when you speak at a large school board meeting, you have a certain amount of time that you are given to speak. I have to wonder what would happen if enough believers attended these meetings and they began what they were speaking, not necessarily with a whole prayer, but just a few simple words. Just, Heavenly Father, give me the words to speak in this place. And then they deliver the message that they were sent there to deliver. How much of a slap in the face is that to the people who don't want to hear it? You can't pray here. It's a public place. In the United States, you have the right to say that. You have the right to speak. But if you begin what you say with that, you have delivered a far more important message. Where's your battle stations? Which one are you assigned to? What have you been trained for? What victory has been appointed for you? If you need help figuring these things out, Give God 90 can help. That's what that 90 days does, is it prepares you. It changes your life. It changes your lifestyle. It does that to improve your life and the lives of the people that you are around. There's things that you can do every day to fight the evil that is so prevalent in the world. It's not difficult. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. There's things you can do every day, sometimes without saying a word. Sometimes just by showing someone some care and compassion. Doesn't matter how much money you have or how much money you don't have. Wherever you are, whoever you are, every one of us has something. I know someone who was in prison for 10 years for a crime they did commit. Okay, that was their battle station. They won a lot of battles. Now, they have a different place to stand and fight. When we accept the life the Creator designed for us to live, we're chosen, we're trained to do the things that He asks us to do. If you're in training, if you are discerning, if you're trying to figure out where you need to be, what you need to say, or even if you're trying to avoid, and I'm guilty of that, I'll confess I'm guilty of it, trying to avoid going somewhere I didn't want to go. If you're trying to avoid going and speaking or displaying compassion for someone that you don't like, Oof, that's tough, isn't it? That's tough. Maybe you're one of the chosen who should speak against sin in your fellowship community, in your personal worship community, because somebody else won't. Ask for confirmation, and when you get it, go speak. Go win the battle. Go do what you were told to do, and you will be blessed for it. Hopefully that clears up any of the questions that I had. If you have more questions, of course, contact us. But until then, we will be here Thursday. Myra should be here with me. And we appreciate each and every one of you. And until then, many, many blessings, everyone.